Pro webinar. Today we'll be talking about authentic employer branding, how to attract the right people for your company, and so on and so forth. Today we have here the co-founders of WorkXO. Between the two, they have over 50 years of experience in this space. First, I'd like to introduce Jamie Nodder. He's the author of the book Millennials Take Over and Humanize. I'm sure you've seen the book, bright yellow and red and floating around. And we also have here Charlie Judy. Charlie's been HR executive for some of the world's biggest companies. Comes from a different angle from Jamie, but I think between the two, you're going to get a full understanding, of all the perspectives and viewpoints on this topic. Before we go on, we'd just like to let you guys know that if you have anything you want to ask us, please feel free to put questions in the GoToWebinar chat functionality, or tweet us with hashtag #CultureChat on Twitter. We'll have one of our marketing reps monitoring that, and she'll make sure to see you if you tweet us out. And I think that's about it. Charlie, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. Hey, Karen and Question Pro and everybody on the call. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks, Question Pro, for inviting us. We've enjoyed kind of pursuing this journey of culture in partnership with you, and look forward to more of that. And glad that many of you have joined us to think about how culture affects how we recruit and essentially how we attract the best people for our business. So I want to start with just a couple of observations. As Karen said, I spent a number of decades as an HR professional on both the recruiting and the talent management side, and certainly have my firsthand experiences in the realm and certainly the challenges of finding the best people today. Jamie's got some great experience as well, and as Karen mentioned, we'll bring kind of another perspective to this. But one thing that's, I think, important for us to start with is the notion that although this webinar is entitled "The Secret to Recruiting the Best Talent," I don't know that there is necessarily any one secret. There certainly are lots of things that need to fall into place in order to make sure we're getting the best people for our business. But I think we're going to try to talk about one that is either oft underused or maybe not even identified with yet. I think we're seeing a lot more attention to it, but we hope it's a concept that will resonate with you and one that you can find a way to practice in your own places of work. And that has everything to really do with authenticity and how we present ourselves to the outside world. I feel like I spent a lot of my time when I was in the realm of as an HR professional, unsuccessfully, quite frankly, convincing the organization that I was trying to represent to our candidate base that we have more to gain from talking about who we really are than we do from trying to pretend we are someone else or trying to present ourselves as someone who we want to be, but maybe are not. And so authenticity has a lot to do with understanding who we are first and getting comfortable with how we talk about that, and then using it to leverage our conversations and attracting the right people in the business. And so that's kind of what we're going to focus on today. I am going to ask that Jamie, you pop in from time to time if there's something that I'm missing, and I'll do the same when I hand the podium over to you. But let's start with this
Absolutely.
observation. Let's start with this observation. So CareerBuilder did this analysis last year. I think they actually do it every year. And of all the things that they uncovered, this one really stood out for me. That today, job seekers are really taking their time to understand what's going on in these organizations that they're pursuing. This whole idea of the consumer, that job seekers are increasingly acting as the consumers of products or services are acting, and they're consulting resources that obviously have not always been available to them, but now are at their fingertips. This kind of says a couple of things to me as we start to lead into this discussion of authenticity. One, I think the workforce for a variety of reasons, but the workforce is maybe more interested in understanding what it's going to be like to work at that place, what the experience is going to really be like, what they're going to kind of touch, feel, taste, smell, the context that comes with it, then maybe they are worried about what the job entails. They're not as concerned about job descriptions anymore. They're concerned about what's the experience, what am I going to, how is it going to feel to be with this organization? And they now have data available to them that maybe they didn't before. The other thing this says is that if this is what they're looking for, if they want that kind of context, then we probably need to get better at giving it to them. Now, the fact that they're checking out 18 different sources could say a number of things. It could say that they're thorough, or it could say that they're not getting what they want from the 18 sources that they have at their fingertips. And so, you know, the war for talent, pardon the cliche, is a war that we know is won in inches. Again, pardon the cliche, but it's true. And so every incremental effort or advantage that we can take is obviously in our exponential benefit, and this maybe is one of them. Can we get better at sharing information about who we really are so that the candidates we're trying to attract are going to, in fact, gravitate to us? And that's kind of the question that we'll pose to you today. I bought a trampoline last week against my better judgment. That's another discussion. We won't deal with that, for my kids. And like any consumer today, I spent a ton of time researching it. I mean, I could go to Amazon. I could go to any website that sells these products and learn all that I could. And I could learn it from people who had actually experienced that product, who had either purchased it and taken it back or purchased it and still have it. But I got that context from them, and I got to do a lot of it. It's getting easier to do that in the world of work, but it's still hard to find kind of that true context, the authentic context around what one is really going to get. Yet the relationship or the analogy remains completely valid. I can take this trampoline back if it doesn't work, if what I researched doesn't represent what I thought I was buying, if the product itself does not represent what I thought I was buying, I can take it back. Your employees and your new hires can do exactly the same thing. It may take them longer. In fact, it usually does take them longer. But as soon as they figure out that it's not what they bargained for, they're as good as gone. And their getting there is going to have a drag on lots of things in your business. We know this intuitively, but what do we do to make sure that they're making the best decision, the best buying decision? Yes, they are purchasing your business in a way. What do we make sure that they're doing, that we're giving them every piece of information they need to make good decisions about whether or not this is the right place for them, whether this is the right product for them? Glossy brochures are a thing of the past. Contrived career pages are a thing of the past. We now have the glass doors of the world, which we could spend an entire web conference talking about. I would still argue it's hard to get really meaningful information from that place, but it's better than what we had before, and people are consulting it. What do we do that's more meaty, that's more meaningful, that actually is going to have an impact on people that are listening to it and paying attention, as we just saw? Here's the one hurdle that we all have to kind of get over before we can even start to take this notion of authenticity, being more open and transparent about who we really are, seriously. We got to get comfortable with people sitting across the table from us and saying, you know what, I don't really like what I'm hearing right now. I'd rather they make that decision while I'm having that conversation with them than, again, after they've been with us for 30 days. If they don't like what they see, they aren't the right talent, AKA the best talent. The best talent for you are the people that are actually going to fit within the environment and the culture, the values, beliefs, behaviors, the actions, all the stuff that you offer, and all of the things that are going to help them thrive. And if they can't find those things that are going to be important to them, maybe not to everybody, but to them, then again, they are not the best talent. We need to get better about talking about what it's really like to be there. And that's not about good or bad. That's not about best place to work. That's just about what is. It's about understanding first who we really are. Because without that understanding, we cannot talk about it in any sort of productive way. It goes to the age-old question, and I use this analogy all the time. When somebody asks you, tell me about yourself. I mean, how many times have you heard that question? And there is nobody in a better position to tell you, maybe except for your mother, to tell you about yourself or to tell them about yourself. Yet we gravitate to the same kinds of words. We even hem and haw. I know I struggle with it. I can't answer that question in any sort of meaningful way still. It takes reflection. It takes introspection. It takes time. But you got to do it. And if you don't do it, you're going to sound like everybody else out there. And those discerning job seekers who are looking for a hint of authenticity, who are looking for a hint of difference, who are looking for the things that they know will allow them to thrive, will see right through it. And so we got to get better at understanding what is and enter the word authenticity. We're hearing it a lot more. We're seeing it a lot more. It's showing up in a number of places, and certainly not just related to recruiting. There's a lot of talk about the value and the power of authenticity in the realm of leadership. But one of the reasons we think it's actually surfacing as a differentiator is because it's a hard one to figure out, because there aren't a lot of organizations that have really figured out how to do this yet. And so we hope that in the next 15, 20 minutes, we'll give you some things to help you get there. And as you do that, and just to kind of set the stage a little bit, here are kind of 4 things that should lay in the back of your mind as we continue this conversation. You got to start with that deeper understanding that I referred to earlier. If you're not able to get to the nit and the grit of what makes you you, you're never going to be able to be authentic about that. And so how you do that, what you do to assess it, to understand it, is an important task for the recruiting and the talent acquisition realm out there today. They may not feel like they're equipped to do that, but if your HR team or others in the organization can't give you that understanding, then work to drive the process by which you attain it, because it's the backbone to how you talk to your clients, i.e. your recruits. As you do that, and Jamie's going to talk more about this, but getting really crystal clear on what is. So what's really valued, what really drives your success, and what makes you distinct. That's where the magic lies, in authenticity. If you can spend your time talking about those things, then you know that you're going to have the ear of those people that are going to be better fit for your organization. Figure out what's truly valued in your organization. Figure out what really drives your success. Get some language around that. Use your language, no one else's language, your language, and that'll be the jumping off point, the launch pad to how you start to share your message and your story. And that requires one final leap, and it's a tough one. But we all got to get more comfortable with transparency. And transparency doesn't mean that we get to throw or have to throw everything out there or all of our dirty laundry. Transparency is not about dirty laundry, but it's about sharing what's important, and it's about sharing what matters. It is definitely not about being all things to all people. The sooner we stop trying to send a message that we think people want to hear, the sooner we stop trying to portray ourselves as an organization that for whatever reason has been classified as, again, the ideal workplace or the best place to work, or if we're not doing X, Y, or Z, we can't possibly be competitive today. I say that needs to change. Let's start figuring out again what drives our success, and let's be that to the people that we need, not to all people. You cannot be all things to all people. And share what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. That goes back to this first slide on the 18 different sources. There's a reason they're going to 18 different sources. If they heard what they wanted to hear, they'd stop after one. They're looking for the stuff that maybe they don't know. And the sooner we can give them that, the sooner they stop looking through those 18 sources. Let us control that message. Let us inform what it is that we want them to understand about our business. And that's really where transparency starts, and that's how transparency leads to authenticity. So the final thing that I'll say, and then pass it over to Jamie, is that we know, and this evidence is surfacing again and again, but culture, and we're going to define a little bit more about what that means, is maybe becoming the most important factor when anybody starts to talk about their experience at work, and certainly when anybody starts to think about recommending their place of work to a friend. If that is in fact the case, then getting smart, so I'm trying to connect the dots here, getting smarter about our culture allows us to understand our business in a more intimate way, allows us to be more transparent with who we are, and allows us to be more authentic with the workforce that's increasingly investigating what they will likely get if they choose to associate with us. And so I'll leave it at that, and Jamie, hand it over to you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the setup. I'll add a little piece about culture and millennials, since that last statistic came from a millennial survey. This is from a different survey, but 77% of millennials, when they were interviewed, said culture is as or more important than pay and benefits. So it's not just about recommending it to friends. Like it means a lot to what is going to be the largest, or I think currently now is the largest segment of the workforce. So it needs our attention, and it needs our attention, as you said, because you can't do the work of really being truly authentic unless you give culture enough attention internally. And I honestly still get pushback from people, from leaders on this, because they say, oh, culture is squishy, it's vague, it's hard to define, it's sort of how we do things here, but I can't really wrap my arms around it. And I agree culture has some complexity to it, but I don't think it's hard to define. And so I've with that in mind, I've been sharing as many times as I can my definition of culture that is up on the screen right now. Culture is the collection of words, actions, thoughts, and forgive the technical term here, stuff, that clarifies and reinforces what is truly valued inside an organization. So if you want to get clear about what your organization really is like, what it's like to work there, then you have to work on the words, actions, thoughts, and stuff piece of that. Like, that's where your culture lives. And it starts with the words. I put that up there intentionally first, because as human beings we live our lives through story, and your organization has a story. When you interview people for a job, eventually they will say, so what's the culture like here? The answer that you give, the words you use to describe your culture, that's a critical piece of your culture. Some of that, when managers tell their direct reports, here's how we do things here. When you lead people through new employee orientation, all the materials you give them, even your core value statement, which I'll talk about in a minute, and other cultural artifacts, you spend a lot of time coming up with words to say what your culture is. And I think we need to be a little more intentional about that, and actually try and describe it in ways that it matches what people experience, because that, of course, is the next part of the definition. Words are one thing, but we all know that actions speak louder than words. And so, no, stay on the blue one. If you say that your culture, really empowers their employees, we let them own their jobs and take initiative and run with things. And then you're walking down the hall and you talk to your direct report and you're like, hey, how's that project going? And they're like, oh, it's done, it's out, we sent it. The client has it, the website is live, whatever it is, like, we're done. And if your instant reaction as a manager is like, ooh, did I get to see that? Who approved that? Like, that behavior just canceled all of those lovely words you've been describing your culture about, because people will remember the behavior. And the next time when you go to ask that employee, hey, how's the project, he's going to say, it's on your desk waiting for approval. And you just lost that engagement, right? You lost that initiative that you think you have in your culture because the behavior is not consistent. So words is one thing, behavior you have to make sure aligns with your words. And then sometimes, I won't talk a lot about thoughts, but the thoughts means the underlying assumptions you have about how people are and how they work together and what your business is about. Like sometimes you have to unearth those deeper assumptions that you don't give voice to in order, because again, it can sometimes be inconsistent with what you're saying it is over time. And then the stuff piece, I put that in there because, words, actions, and thoughts, that's what the human beings in your organization are doing when they are creating and living your culture. Stuff just refers to the tangible things that also shape your culture. So your office location. Are you in the middle of the city? Are you in the suburbs? Are you urban, rural? Your office decor defines your culture because it clarifies what's valued. How do you have your desks set up? Is it a sea of gray cubicles? Is it everyone has their own office? Are you in a funky space with open tables where everyone's working together? All of that stuff clarifies and reinforces what's valued inside the organization. And that's the other piece that I just wanted to say about the definition. People say culture is just, so this is how we do things here. It's not how we do things here. It's about what is valued inside the organization. And I highlight the word valued with a D, because it's not about values with an S. And if you've got a core values statement out there, like, more power to you. But to be honest, most core value statements are sort of lowest common denominator, like stuff that everyone agrees on. I bet your core values have, innovation or quality or integrity or honesty, and those are great. But I'm not sure that really drives behavior. I look at Enron. Enron had beautiful core values hung up in their lobby, and I'm sure with integrity and honesty was there, but that's not what was valued there, right? What was valued is you make your numbers. Even if you have to make a big accounting firm lie, you make your numbers. Now, I wasn't part of Enron, so I don't know how they clarified that and reinforced that through their words, actions, and thoughts and stuff, but they did. And people knew it. Your organization, the people in your organization, they know your culture even if you can't name it, because they know what's valued. Now, that being said, knowing what your culture is fine, but I don't want it just to be a culture. I want it to be a strong culture. And Charlie mentioned this earlier. Particularly if you're trying to recruit the best talent, you need to be able to make it clear that your culture, what you value inside your culture, that is aligned very clearly with what drives the success of the enterprise. So a quick example from the culture cool kids, Zappos. They have a very decentralized culture, and they actually give a lot of power to their call center employees, and call center employees typically don't have a lot of power. They don't get to make a lot of decisions. They read scripts for the most part. I mean, they can't even decide exactly how to respond. It is told to them how they will respond. But at Zappos, they don't do that. They don't have the scripts, and they let their employees, their call center employees, upgrade your account. They'll make a decision to give you free shipping. They can even stay on the phone as long as they want. Which again is not a call center best practice. You're supposed to get them on the phone and off the phone quickly. It's more efficient. But in Zappos, they give the power to the employee. You stay on the phone with that customer as long as you think it's necessary. The record, by the way, is 11 hours for one call. It was not me. But the reason they do that is not because they read a book that said decentralization is cool. They do that because to be successful as an online retailer, particularly with selling shoes, you have to wow the customer. They do have a list of core values, and number one is delivering a wow experience to the customer. It's not just good enough to have good customer service. They want people to hang up the phone and go, wow. And if you want that, if that drives your success, which is what they bet the farm on when they were growing back 10 years ago, then you have to create a culture that values the behavior that's going to let that happen. So you give power to the people who are on the phone with the customer. All right, so that's what you need to do inside your organization, is figure out what behaviors you need to get the success, and then create a culture that values that and align that, and then again make that clear through your words and your behaviors and your thoughts. All that has to be done. That, however, is where I get my next round of pushback from folks, which is, then we have to change the culture. And so they think, all right, well, I got this culture that we have now, and yeah, I realize I need to be more decentralized maybe to drive our success, so we got to do culture change. Then I get everyone talking about exactly what processes you'll use, what materials you'll do. Do we have to train our staff? What do the senior managers say? We focus on this process of culture change, and in doing so, we end up failing. Because what we're not paying attention to is the original pieces of this slide, which is current state and future state. We're not talking about what's it really like to work here. We're not talking about what is our culture, as Charlie said earlier, at a granular level. Okay, and if we would actually spend more time, you can go ahead, talking about the current state, talking about what our culture is, and really talking about, actually go to the next one too, really talking about what drives our success, what works. Like most organizations, they focus on the culture change, but they don't do the what is work, and they don't do the what works work. Okay, they don't actually define their culture in a way that their employees would say, yeah, that's actually what it's like here. And then they don't do the hard work, like I think that Zappos did in that one example, saying, you know what, it has to be about customer service. That actually, we have to value that more. And so if we're going to get that, if that's going to drive our success, then yeah, we need a culture where we can give more power to the people who are on the front lines. They also actually have, talking about authenticity, Charlie, they have as one of their core values that people are all a little weird, and that's okay. They demand authenticity in the workplace, not because they read the Bill George article, but because that's going to give that wow experience when you talk to a real human being, right? So they figured that out, built that into your culture. But if you don't do the what works and what is piece of this, then you're always going to be off in your culture change. And people blame the change process, and it's actually because they didn't do the hard work. Now, Charlie and I and our business partner, Maddie Grant, actually are developing an assessment that's going to get in a detailed way to that what is piece, right? And so we're doing this with Question Pro. We're really excited about the partnership, but we've identified 8 actual culture markers. You need to actually get down and dirty and say, who are we as an organization around these things, agility, collaboration, growth, etc. Like, how transparent are we? And it's not just, oh, we're generally transparent, or we love transparency. No, who shares information with whom, how frequently, what are the rules about whether the senior management team is actually going to release the notes to its meeting. Like, you have to get detailed in explaining what information do we share and why do we share it and how do we share it. And if you can name that and say, look, here's what it's really like to work here, that gets you back to the original point here, which is authenticity. Like, you can actually describe your organization in a clear way based on these kinds of markers. When you actually hire someone 6 months later, they're going to say, that's it. You were right. That's exactly what I was promised, and this is what I'm getting. When you can do that, you can move to the last slide. When you do that, that's where you get the employee engagement. Right? That's where you get that sort of discretionary effort from employees, because they were delivered what they said was going to be delivered. And so they knew what they were getting into, and they already voted, yeah, that's what I want. And when they experience it, then it's on, you've got people working on all 4 cylinders. So, Charlie, anything to add to wrap it up before we move to questions?
No, I think you did a really nice job, and I was just going to go back to this slide and maybe just make one observation, because there's a lot of stuff here, and there's certainly a lot to understand about our own workplaces. But if you bear in mind again that there are success factors or things that drive your success that are likely unique to you, even when compared to your competitors in the same industry. It is likely that there are things, there are behaviors and actions and thoughts and beliefs that take place in your workplace that make you successful. It may not be all these things. It may be one or two of them. But finding out which of those things are important to bridge the gap into the recruiting conversation it feeds then into the messaging that you're sharing and the kinds of people that you're looking for. Because if what drives your success is not important to the people that you're trying to hire, then you're hiring the wrong people. So again, it's about establishing that awareness and that understanding so that it can feed into everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't go into the whole story, by the way, but just as a quick example of that, one of the organizations that we profiled in the When Millennials Take Over book, they're so much about collaboration. I won't explain their whole business model, but that's so important to them. When they hire people, they do a group interview and they have the two candidates pair up and do something together. You're actually you're working with your competitor, and the folks that sort of want to be the smartest and show the right answer and don't collaborate, they don't make it to the next round. So it's a great example of when you get that clarity, then you build it into your recruiting process.
Hello.
So I think that's it for the prepared remarks. If there are any questions that we want to continue the dialogue over, we're happy, of course, to do that.
Hi. Yes, we do have questions. But just before we launch into those, just want to thank you two again for coming out and showing your expertise and giving us all your insight. And to our listeners, before we start questions, just wanted to let you guys know that this webinar is a series of 4. The next one will be at June 8th, same time, 11 o'clock PST. And now we'll launch into questions. So we have one from Maddie that says, what if you have a lot of conflicting cultures inside your organization? Maybe one department is one way, the other department is another way. How do you start to define what is the overall culture of that company?
Jamie, do you want to start with that?
Sure. I mean, it's an important point I think you have to acknowledge, and this is true in every organization. You always have groups inside your organization, and they all will have slightly different cultures, and that's okay. I mean, we sort of have to accept that. You don't sort of demand that everyone be exactly the same way, but it's a question of what kind of variance are you going to tolerate. And that, in answering that question, it has to be based on, well, what impact does it have on success? So there can be a department that actually does things in a very sort of routinized way because that's what they do, and that's their piece of the success of the organization. Whereas there might be another department like marketing that's going to be more creative and flexible and doing things differently. That's fine because those two things can be connected together when they need to, and they actually are driving the success of the organization. Again, back to the example I gave a minute ago, though. In that organization, you're collaborating, so you can't have a department that's like, you know what, I'm not really good at collaboration, because it drives their success so much. And so you have to take it on a case-by-case basis, I think, about what difference you can actually tolerate among subgroups.
Yeah, and I mean, I would just add, I think, it goes back to this conversation around granularity. I mean, the better you understand it, the better position you're going to be to kind of sort through what matters to the organization at large, what matters to particular functions or aspects of our business, and to pretend like we can very nicely, neatly put a bow on culture for every organization is the wrong starting point. It's messy, but figuring out what matters to the distinct groups in your business are going to help you tell your story in a way that's going to matter to the people that you're trying to hire for those distinct aspects. I had a conversation today with a group, a woman who is part of a higher education organization, and I asked her what it's like to work there, and she said it's lonely. And we started to dig a little bit further, and well, it turns out she's with a research arm, and they spend a lot of time behind closed doors because they're highly intellectual and they're working on tough stuff and they're contributing as individual contributors. I mean, that may not be the right place for her, but the kinds of people that they're hiring for that research arm in that higher education institution, that's probably the cultural component that they really need to have. So understanding those nuances and then getting comfortable with it, I think that's the overarching story.
So this is a question directed specifically for Charlie. Once you define your authentic culture, how do you take that info and use it for recruiting purposes? Are there some like common key cultural traits and indicators you make sure to emphasize when you're talking to the candidate?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a couple things. We actually do a little bit of an analysis where we we kind of line up a couple of variables, and we take a look at first how strongly are certain cultural aspects experienced. So how strongly are certain behaviors identified with by the organization, and then we take a look at like how clear are those behaviors. So does everybody experience them? Is it in pockets? And what we found is that the intersection of prominence and clarity, so really strong like identification with these behaviors. Yes, I know that. I can point to that. And clarity, everybody can point to that. It's not just, this group over here or that group over there. Those turn out to be kind of your differentiators. And those are the ones that are driving your kind of uniqueness, your distinctness. And might be at the lead of or the front of any messaging that you're putting together. But one thing that's really important, and there are obviously other things that you can do to kind of filter through all of your behaviors to figure out which ones you ought to be focused on talking about. But once you've done that, I think it's pretty important that anybody who touches the recruiting process, so from all of your collateral, whether it's traditional glossy brochures to career pages to job postings to the hiring managers to your recruiters and anybody else that may be involved along the way, I mean, you need to be clear about what that message is, and you need to share it consistently. Because if you don't share it consistently, and not in any contrived way, but because you can all nod your head around that behavior and say, yeah, that's us. If you don't do that consistently, then you've lost your credibility and you've lost your authenticity. So it's work. You got to see it through, really kind of all the way to the end to make sure that those conversations are happening in a clear way.
Thank you, Charlie. We have actually a question from one of our listeners, Nicole. She asked is there any advice for retaining information services / tech employees, given that they usually leave after 2 to 3 years, regardless of job satisfaction or progressive culture and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have a couple thoughts, Jamie. You may as well. I mean, I think we all have to get happier, more comfortable with the idea that nothing's wrong with people leaving every 2 to 3 years. Mm-hmm. And I think the idea of trying to retain them is admirable, and certainly we should be doing that if in fact we believe we can offer them a superior experience. But we know, I mean, even just from a generational perspective, and Jamie can talk more about this, but job seekers today, careerists today, look at every employer opportunity much differently than certainly I did 10 years ago. There's some studies that say, 1 in 4 at least, it's probably higher now, but 1 in 4 of your employees view their current job purely as a stepping stone to the next opportunity. Well, if that's right, and again, it's probably more than that now, then you've got 25% voluntary turnover baked into your organization from the get-go. So get comfortable with that. Like, make sure that while they're there, in those 2 years that they're there, that you're giving them everything that you can possibly give them. So when they go back out into the world, they become recruiters for you. They become that raving fan. They become that net promoter who can talk about the experience, not because they didn't decide to stay there longer than 2 years, but because while they were there, they got exactly what they were looking for.
Yeah, there's a great concept to add on to that piece that Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn wrote an article in HBR about, and it's the notion, I think it would be really good for tech people, I think, in terms of retaining them, the notion of creating a tour of duty. Instead of just hiring somebody and saying, okay, I kind of hope you'll work here forever, and the employee's like, okay, I'm kind of planning on working there forever, except when I leave, and I'm not going to tell you. Instead of that, say, look, here's the deal. Your first tour is 2 years. and here's exactly what you're going to learn in that part. And because it's to the stepping stone point, Charlie, like you actually say, yeah, this might be a stepping stone. So for 2 years, you'll do this. Here's what you'll give us. Here's what we'll give you. Here's the learning you get. Here's the value we're going to get from your employment. And then after 2 years, we can decide to re-up and come and design a new tour. And then maybe you're learning different things, and maybe it's a slightly longer tour. And there, you can eventually get to become an owner, and you maybe have a 20-year tour. I love that concept. I think in the tech world, particularly, they like that because they're starting with a really clear sense of I need these skills so I can get to the next. I need to learn this stuff so I can get to the next level. As Charlie said, let's embrace that. The only other thing I'll say as a bit of a pushback is I think organizations that have really, really strong cultures where they know what drives success, and the people who find a job there that says, wow, that's exactly how I like to work, I think they're going to stay a lot longer. The places that we interviewed, these are places where people say things like, I can't imagine working anywhere else. And some of them are in the tech industry. There's a software company that people are saying that. They go because they've been working there for 4 years right out of college. They think it's got to be better somewhere else. They go somewhere else. They come back in 2 years and they work for another 5 there. Like they have a lot of people starting their second job there because they just couldn't believe that this place was so great. And then when they got out in the real world, they realized this place is great. And so I think if you really build an incredibly strong culture, you will retain them even though they come in with a stepping stone. Once they see that, once they align with that, I think they will stay longer than people think they will.
So I want to say a couple things about that. I think this is a good conversation. I mean, one, just to clarify, strong culture, again, strong culture means values aligned with success drivers. But that Zappos' strong culture is maybe not your strong culture. And what made those employees say, I can't imagine working anywhere else, was that first the organization had extreme clarity on what drove their success and what they valued, and then they were extremely authentic about having that bleed into every other aspect of the employment cycle, including recruiting, and being very clear that if this isn't the kind of place for you, that's cool, but it's not the kind of place for you. So that alignment is really, really important. The other thing that I was going to say, I completely forgot. So I'm going to pause and maybe ask another question, and I'll remember.
Hi, I think we just have time for one last question. Given that you've kind of ended on the note about what is the right culture for your company, when a company decides, to begin this culture work, who should take ownership of it? Is it marketing? Is it HR? Is it the C-suite?
Well, I think you have to, if it's not the C-suite, then people are, if they don't at least sort of embrace it and say yes, then no one's going to do it. And this bugs me, actually. I can't stand this about organizations. People are staring intently at the C-suite and looking at their behaviors and scrutinizing them. And if they think that the C-suite wants to go in a different direction, then they're going to go in that direction, even if that's actually not what the C-suite wants. So you can't do it without them. But that being said, in the end, everyone has to own this. Like in the end, like someone's going to drive it, start it, push it. But if you can't get people to sort of believe in the culture work and do it at their level with their direct reports in their department, then you're not going to get the full benefit.
All right. I think that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much, Charlie and Jamie, for giving us your time and your insights, like I've said before. To our attendees, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with the YouTube link, as well with a blog post summarizing the key points of today. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot a tweet with the #CultureChat or an email to any of the email addresses you see on the screen right now. Our next will be back on June 8th. Hope to see you there again.
Thanks, everybody. Really enjoyed it. Appreciate it.